I lost a true friend. Sylvester Stallone breaks silence on Hulk Hogan's death at 71. Hollywood legend Sylvester Stallone honors the late WWE icon Hulk Hogan with a heartfelt tribute you won't forget. In this emotional video, we take a closer look at Stallone's powerful reaction to the passing of his longtime friend and Rocky III co-star, Hulk Hogan. From their legendary friendship to untold behind-the-scenes stories, discover how Stallone remembered the man who defined an era of wrestling and pop culture. Expect exclusive quotes, fan reactions, and a deep dive into Hogan's legacy in both Hollywood and WWE. Sylvester Stallone was silent. Not because he had nothing to say, but because there were no words big enough to carry the weight of this goodbye. Hulk Hogan was gone. At 71 years old, the man who once body-slammed giants and electrified arenas had taken his final bow. But for Stallone, this wasn't just the loss of a fellow icon, a colleague, or even a co-star. This was personal. This was heartbreak. This was losing a brother. The world knew him as the Immortal. As the face of professional wrestling, Hulk Hogan transcended the squared circle. But to Sylvester Stallone, he was always Terry. A fierce friend. A towering presence not just in stature but in soul. Their bond had been forged in the heat of Hollywood, solidified in the chaos of fame, and tested through the decades. And now, in the quiet after the storm, Stallone was left to remember what the world had almost forgotten, that beneath the bandanas and bravado was a man of enormous heart. Their journey began in 1982. Rocky III. Stallone was at the peak of his power, reinventing his boxing saga for a third round. But something was missing, an antagonist unlike any he'd faced before. That's when the idea hit him. He needed someone bigger than life. A real-life Goliath to square off against his underdog champion. And there was only one man who fit the bill, Hulk Hogan. At the time, Hogan wasn't yet the global phenomenon he'd become. He was still clawing his way up the wrestling ranks, terrifying opponents and thrilling crowds in regional promotions. But the moment Stallone saw him perform, he knew. This guy's going to be a star, Stallone once said. Not just in the ring, but everywhere. The casting of Hogan as Thunder Lips, the ultimate male, was a gamble for the studio. But for Stallone, it was instinct. And that instinct birthed one of the most unforgettable moments in sports movie history. The scene was chaotic, almost surreal. Thunder Lips lifting Rocky like a rag doll. The crowd roaring. Flashbulbs going off. But what fans didn't see was the camaraderie that blossomed behind the scenes. Stallone later admitted that Hogan's strength in the ring wasn't just for show. During filming, Hogan accidentally knocked Stallone unconscious with a powerful move, a moment that could have ended in resentment. But instead, it sparked laughter. And from that laughter, a friendship was born. For Stallone, Hogan represented something rare in Hollywood, a man who never tried to be someone he wasn't. Despite the fame, despite the spotlight, Hogan stayed grounded. Off camera, he was soft-spoken. Gentle. Thoughtful. Stallone often remarked that Hogan was the kind of man who would give you the shirt off his back, then sign it for your kid before he left. And over the years, their paths continued to cross. Not always publicly. Not always on camera. But always with mutual respect. In the decades that followed, Stallone and Hogan's bond endured. They were from different worlds, yet cut from the same cloth, fighters, showmen, survivors. They shared more than screen time, they shared battles. Hogan fought the politics of wrestling. Stallone fought for creative control in Hollywood. Both stood against giants. Both carried the weight of expectation. And both knew what it meant to fall, and to rise again. So when news broke of Hulk Hogan's death, it wasn't just the wrestling world that stopped. It was Stallone who paused, who disappeared from the limelight for nearly a day, retreating into silence. For those who know him, this wasn't avoidance. It was reverence. It was grief. When he finally spoke, it wasn't with fanfare or dramatic flair. It was with raw honesty. I lost a true friend, Stallone posted on his social media, accompanied by a black and white photo of the two of them on the Rocky III set, arms around each other, laughing like boys who hadn't yet become legends. He made the world cheer. He made me believe. Rest in peace, my brother. The post went viral instantly. Tens of thousands of fans responded. Some were shocked. Others heartbroken. Many simply wrote thank you, Hulk, or rest easy, champ. But what stood out most were the people who said they felt like they'd lost a piece of their childhood. Because that's what Hogan was, a living piece of the American dream. A reminder of what it meant to believe in heroes, and yet, Stallone's tribute wasn't about Hulkamania or championships. It wasn't about WrestleMania or red and yellow. It was about Terry. About the man who showed up on Stallone's movie set as a hungry wrestler, and walked off a global icon. It was about the late-night phone calls they shared during tough times. About the quiet conversations no one else ever heard. About the promises they made to each other when the world wasn't watching. The two men came from different beginnings. Stallone, the scrappy actor who once sold his dog to survive. Hogan, the Florida kid who dreamed of being a rock star before discovering the ring. Yet both would come to define toughness, charisma, and what it meant to never back down. Together, they became larger than life. And now, one of them is gone. Hogan's passing also marks a symbolic end of an era. The 80s are long gone, but their echoes remain. In every body slam. In every chant. In every film montage. And in the legacy of brotherhood that men like Stallone and Hogan created together. It wasn't just a friendship. It was a cultural moment that spanned generations. As the tributes poured in from fans, fellow wrestlers, and celebrities, one thing became clear: Hulk Hogan wasn't just loved. He was cherished. He was part of our collective memory. A symbol of strength and perseverance. But no tribute struck deeper than Stallone's. Because it wasn't polished. It wasn't PR. It was human. Sources close to the actor said he's been privately mourning since the news broke. That he's been watching old clips of Hogan's matches. Replaying interviews. Reflecting on the decades they shared, on screen and off. It's like losing a limb, one insider claimed. Stallone said. There are friends, and then there are brothers. Terry was my brother. And as millions mourn, Stallone's grief gives voice to something many fans feel but can't quite articulate. It's not just that a wrestler died. It's that a light went out. A memory. A symbol. A piece of who we used to be. The finality of Hogan's death casts a long shadow. But it also highlights the importance of the memories left behind. Of the people we cherish. Of the bonds that outlive fame. In the end, Stallone's tribute is more than a farewell. It's a reminder. A reminder to value the real ones while we have them. To pick up the phone. To say thank you. To forgive. To remember, because even icons fall. But friendship? That lasts forever. The days following Hulk Hogan's death were unlike anything the WWE Universe, or Hollywood, had experienced in years. News outlets ran retrospectives. Talk shows played highlight reels. Former champions, Hollywood actors, and even politicians chimed in with their condolences. But behind the scenes, something more intimate, more human, was unfolding. Sylvester Stallone wasn't giving interviews. He wasn't attending red carpets. He had quietly boarded a plane to Florida. Because for him, this wasn't about headlines. It was about saying goodbye in person. Stallone had always maintained a unique balance between fame and privacy. Despite decades in the spotlight, the actor remained guarded with his emotions, especially when it came to loss. But sources close to the family confirmed what many suspected: Stallone had asked Hogan's loved ones for permission to attend the private memorial service being held at an undisclosed church in Clearwater. It wasn't a spectacle. No cameras. No fanfare. Just family. And Stallone, when he arrived, wearing a dark suit and sunglasses that failed to hide the tears in his eyes, whispers filled the room. Grown men, many of them lifelong friends of Hogan's, were stunned into silence by Stallone's presence. He didn't come as a celebrity, one attendee recalled. He came as a brother. During the closed-door portion of the service, Stallone reportedly spoke without notes. No speech. No script. Just memories. He recounted their first meeting, the way Hogan nearly missed the audition for Rocky III because he thought it was a prank. The way they stayed up all night drinking protein shakes and talking about life after fame. The time Hogan called him during one of his darkest nights and stayed on the phone for hours until Stallone fell asleep. "We were supposed to grow old together," Stallone said, his voice cracking. "We promised we'd never stop fighting. But Terry, you fought long enough." The room was still. The moment was real. And then, from the back of the chapel, someone began to softly hum the Rocky theme. It wasn't planned. But soon, others joined in. Not as a tribute to Stallone, but to both men. To their legacy. To the bond that shaped generations. Outside, fans gathered. Hundreds lined the streets in silence, many holding up signs that read, "Rest in power, Hulk." Others simply wept, overwhelmed by the magnitude of the moment. Hogan had meant something different to everyone. Hero, villain, inspiration, entertainer. But to all, he had meant something. That night, Stallone returned to his hotel and posted a second tribute on his social media. This time, it was a short video. Just him, alone, in his hotel room. No background music. No cuts. "I didn't think I'd have to do this so soon," he said, his eyes red. "You don't meet many people in this life who really get you. Terry got me. And I got him. He was more than muscle. He had a heart the size of Florida. And a laugh that could knock down walls." He paused, then leaned forward. "I hope you're up there right now, brother. Telling God your promos. Flexing for the angels. I'll see you again. Just, save me a spot." The video went viral in seconds. Millions viewed. Millions cried. Comment sections became digital vigils. Fans from every corner of the world, wrestling diehards, film buffs, 80s kids, and younger generations just discovering Hogan, shared their grief. But the impact wasn't limited to fans. WWE responded with swift emotion. The following episode of Monday Night Raw opened not with pyro, not with music, but with silence. A 10-bell salute. A spotlight on the center of the ring. And a pair of red and yellow boots placed gently atop the canvas. Then, the Jumbotron lit up with a tribute video. Clips from Hogan's legendary matches. Scenes from Rocky III. Candid behind-the-scenes footage of him with Stallone, Vince McMahon, Randy Savage, and other legends. In one shot, Hogan and Stallone were laughing uncontrollably while trying to film a training montage. The voiceover? Stallone himself, "To the man who taught the world how to believe in heroes," he said, narrating the package. "Thank you. For every suplex, every slam, every story. You were never just a wrestler. You were family." Tears weren't just shed in the crowd. Wrestlers backstage were seen embracing. Even Paul Heyman, known for his cold on-screen demeanor, reportedly stood in the gorilla position with his hand over his heart the entire time. Fan-made murals appeared within hours across New York, Tampa, and Los Angeles. One, painted on the side of an old gym in Venice Beach, featured a towering image of Hogan with Stallone beside him, fists raised. The caption, "Legends never die." But perhaps the most powerful moment came days later, at the WWE Hall of Fame induction ceremony, an event Hogan was set to attend as a presenter. Instead, it became a night of remembrance. Stallone made an unannounced appearance. The arena went silent as he walked out, holding Hogan's signature feather boa. For the first time in the Hall of Fame's history, a non-wrestler was allowed to deliver a keynote eulogy. Standing under the lights, Stallone addressed the crowd not as an actor, but as a grieving friend. "We live in a world where strength is measured by muscles, championships, ticket sales," he began. "But real strength, that's how you treat people when the cameras are off." That was Terry. That was Hulk Hogan. He made us laugh. He made us cheer. But most of all, he made us feel. And isn't that what legends are supposed to do? The arena rose in unison. A standing ovation. Tears in every section. For Sylvester Stallone, the pain will linger. The friendship that once brought so much light is now a quiet memory. But in honoring Hogan, he's given the world something rare, an unfiltered look at love, loss, and the legacy of brotherhood, and for fans everywhere, this tribute will live on, not just in the archives of WWE or the reels of Hollywood, but in hearts that were touched by a bond deeper than any storyline, louder than any crowd, because in the end, legends may fade, but the stories we tell about them, those echo forever. Here's the final continuation to complete your emotionally cinematic expose video script based on the topic I lost a true friend. Sylvester Stallone breaks silence on Hulk Hogan's death at 71. But as the spotlight faded and the tributes slowed, what remained was something no viral clip or televised segment could capture: grief. Real, human grief. And for Stallone, that grief didn't end when the tribute video aired or when the arena roared one last time. It followed him home. Into the quiet corners of his house. Into the memories that now echoed a little louder, a little emptier. Friends close to the actor described the days after Hogan's memorial as eerily still. For a man always in motion, writing, directing, training, Stallone had become contemplative. Slower. Not broken, but bruised. It's like losing the last living part of your youth, he reportedly told one confidant. We weren't just in a movie together. We lived through eras together. And maybe that's what hit hardest. That Hogan's death wasn't just the passing of a friend, it was the closing of a chapter. The 80s, that golden age of action heroes and larger-than-life athletes, had now officially become history. And Stallone, ever the survivor, was left alone to carry the torch. But even in the pain, there was gratitude. Because Stallone had known Hogan not just as a legend, but as a man. As Terry. And that, in itself, was a gift. He began reviewing footage from Rocky III not out of vanity, but out of remembrance. Watching scenes they'd shot in a single take. Laughing at the bloopers where Hogan couldn't stop breaking character. Revisiting interviews where they joked about who was stronger. You know, Stallone said in one of them, Terry could bench press a Buick, but he couldn't remember his lines to save his life. It was in these moments that Stallone found healing. Not in grand speeches or headlines, but in the simple act of remembering. In a final act of tribute, Stallone quietly approached WWE and proposed a scholarship fund in Hogan's name. One that would support young wrestlers and stunt performers with limited access to healthcare. If there's one thing Terry would want, he said, it's for the next generation to have it a little easier than we did. The fund, now known as the Hogan Legacy Grant, will officially launch next WrestleMania weekend, with Stallone set to present the inaugural recipients, and with that, the circle closes. The friendship that began in the most Hollywood of settings, a movie set, ended in the most human of ways. Through grief. Through remembrance. Through action. For Stallone, there is no moving on. Only moving forward. With the lessons Hogan left behind. With the laughter. With the scars. With the brotherhood. And for the millions watching around the world, the message is simple: behind every superstar, every headline, every legend, there's a person. A story. A heart that beats just like yours. So the next time you hear "Eye of the Tiger," or see a red and yellow bandana, or watch a clip of Thunder Lips tossing Rocky across the ring, remember what it all meant. Not just to us, but to them. To Sylvester Stallone, Hulk Hogan was more than a co-star. He was more than a wrestler. He was family. And now, as the lights dim and the curtain falls, Stallone says goodbye the only way he knows how, not with applause but with silence and love. In the weeks that followed, Sylvester Stallone found himself surrounded by reminders of Hulk Hogan, reminders not just of the legend, but of the man behind the myth. It wasn't just old photos and memorabilia that triggered the waves of grief. It was the silence. The absence. The space Hogan once filled, now echoing with memory. He began to revisit their old text threads, often scrolling back months, sometimes years, reading through messages filled with brotherly teasing, philosophical tangents, and raw, vulnerable admissions. They say we're invincible, Hogan once wrote. But every now and then, I feel the years catching up. You ever feel that? Stallone's reply, sent 2 minutes later, was simple: every damn day. But as long as we're standing, we fight. That exchange haunted him now. Because Terry Bollea, the man behind Hulk Hogan, had fought harder than most. Through spinal surgeries, marital collapses, financial ruin, and the glare of relentless public scrutiny, Hogan had endured. And yet, when the end came, it didn't come in the ring. It came quietly, offstage, in the shadow of his own legacy. Stallone began journaling again, something he hadn't done since the early 2000s. He filled pages with memories of road trips, candid phone calls, and Hogan's unmistakable laugh that could shake walls. He had this ability, Stallone wrote in one entry, to walk into a room and make everyone feel like they belonged. That's rare. Especially in our world. But grief, as Stallone understood all too well, was never just a solitary experience. It ripples outward. And the ripple effect of Hogan's death began reshaping not just lives, but an entire era's mythology. The media dubbed it the passing of the last American gladiator. It was everywhere: news articles titled The End of the Golden Age, late-night retrospectives, podcasts dissecting his influence on modern entertainment. Yet, for Stallone, the mythologizing felt hollow. It polished over the rough edges, the humanity that made Hogan real. He wasn't perfect, Stallone later told a close friend. God, he messed up. We both did. But he owned it. And that's more than I can say for most people in this business. Privately, Stallone began coordinating with Hogan's children, Brooke and Nick, to produce a documentary, not about Hulk Hogan, the entertainer, but Terry Bollea, the man. He was more than the gimmick, Stallone insisted. People need to see the full picture. Not just the red and yellow. Early production notes reveal that the documentary will be narrated by Stallone himself and will feature never-before-seen behind-the-scenes footage from Rocky III, handwritten letters from Hogan to friends during his legal battles, and exclusive interviews with those closest to him, including Vince McMahon, Linda Hogan, and The Rock, who credits Hogan with saving his career. Stallone also reached out to Vince personally, requesting that WWE rename the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal in Hogan's honor for 1 year. Andre would understand, Stallone reportedly told McMahon. This is about legacy. About the heart behind the muscle. WWE agreed. At the next WrestleMania, the renamed Hulk Hogan Memorial Battle Royal will be introduced by Stallone in a pre-recorded segment, followed by a thunderous ovation and a surprise. Hogan's signature Real American theme playing through the stadium one final time as fans chant his name in unison. For one night, the Immortal One will return, not in flesh, but in spirit. And beside him, figuratively and emotionally, will be Stallone, his brother in arms. In his quiet moments at home, Stallone has taken to lighting a single candle each night on his balcony. Not for religious reasons, but for remembrance. A ritual. A moment to connect. It's strange, he said in a rare voice memo, how much someone's presence can linger after they're gone. I hear his voice sometimes. In my gym. In the script notes. In the way I walk into a room and hear WOOO echoing in my head. As he prepares to return to directing his next project, Stallone carries Hogan with him. In the dedication page of the script, tucked quietly into the first draft, he's written a single sentence, for Terry. The loudest soul I ever knew. Fans continue to grieve too, in their own ways. Some wear vintage Hulkamania shirts to events. Others share clips of their favorite moments online. One even started a foundation in his name to help children with scoliosis, honoring Hogan's own spinal battles. In gyms across the country, men and women raise iron to the sky and whisper, "What you gonna do, brother?" as they push past their limits. It's not about the words anymore. It's about the spirit. The energy. The belief that no matter how hard life slams you, you can always get up. Stallone knows this more than most, and as the weeks become months, and the world spins forward, the pain begins to dull, but it never disappears, because grief is the price we pay for love. And Sylvester Stallone? He loved him not for the championships. Not for the legacy, but for the man behind the muscles, the man who showed up, the man who never backed down, the man he now says goodbye to every single night. In the months after Hogan's passing, something quietly shifted in Sylvester Stallone. Friends noticed it before he did. The way he lingered a little longer during goodbyes. The sudden silences in the middle of conversations. The way he'd stop mid-rep at the gym and stare at the wall, lost in a memory. It wasn't just grief, it was awakening. When a giant falls, the ground shakes. And for Stallone, Hulk Hogan was that giant. Not just in stature, but in presence. He had always felt, deep down, that the world would somehow pause for people like Terry Bollea. That someone so loud, so alive, so impossible to ignore would never simply disappear, but he had, and now, Stallone was left with a mirror. Not the kind in a gym. The kind that forces you to face your own timeline. Your own fragility. He began pulling old journals from storage, tattered leather notebooks, yellowing pages filled with half-baked movie ideas, workout logs, and scribbled quotes from conversations with Hogan over the years. One stood out. Dated May 1996. Written in Stallone's quick, slanted hand. Terry said something today. You know what scares me the most? Not dying. Being forgotten. I told him that's never going to happen. But I didn't really believe it until now. That line haunted him. So he started writing again. Not for Hollywood. Not for a script. But for himself. A memoir, of sorts. A deeply personal manuscript, tentatively titled Still Standing, Brotherhood, Loss, and the Last Days of the Ring. It wasn't meant for publishers. Not yet. It was therapy. A place where Stallone could pour out the weight he'd been carrying since Hogan's death. Not just the grief, but the realization that time was no longer on his side. He wrote about the lonely moments on set when fame felt suffocating, and how Hogan would call out of nowhere just to crack a joke or talk about the past. He wrote about the nights after their respective divorces when both men sat in silence, not saying much, but understanding everything. But most of all, he wrote about legacy, what it means to matter. What it means to remain after you're gone, and in doing so, Stallone slowly began to heal. Meanwhile, the wrestling world was undergoing its own transformation. Hogan's death had opened a generational wound, one that fans didn't even realize they were carrying. For decades, Hulk Hogan was more than just a performer. He was the gateway. The first name you heard. The first poster on your wall. The first voice that made you believe wrestling could be something more, and now that voice was gone. WWE responded with a series of tributes that Stallone quietly consulted on behind the scenes. A special edition of WWE Chronicle was dedicated entirely to Hogan's impact, featuring voiceovers written by Stallone himself. He refused payment. This isn't content, he told them. This is closure. The documentary was raw. Honest. It didn't shy away from Hogan's controversies, his career missteps, personal struggles, or public scandals. But it placed them in the full context of a man who was always evolving, always trying to make things right. A man who, in Stallone's words, never stopped fighting to be better. The response was overwhelming. Fans flooded social media with stories of how Hogan had inspired them to face bullies, to get healthy, to believe in themselves. One fan, a former Army veteran, shared that Hogan's larger-than-life persona had pulled him out of a dark depression after returning from combat. He reminded me what strength looked like, the man wrote. Even if it was just on TV. For Stallone, these stories meant everything, because they confirmed what he had always known, that Hogan's reach went far beyond the ring or the big screen. He was, in many ways, a living symbol. Of resilience. Of reinvention. Of the flawed hero who keeps showing up, and Stallone, he carried that symbol with him every day. During a surprise appearance on The Tonight Show, the host asked Stallone the question everyone was thinking but too afraid to ask, do you think you'll ever be the same again? There was a pause, and then Stallone smiled, tired, weathered, but still powerful. No, he said. And I don't want to be. When you lose someone like Terry, it changes your rhythm. But that's how you know they mattered. The audience fell silent, and in that moment, it became clear, Stallone wasn't just grieving a friend, he was honoring a legacy, rebuilding himself, learning how to walk forward with one less heartbeat beside him, and so he did. He returned to his writing desk, to his training, to his unfinished projects, but now, every frame of film, every typed word, every rep in the gym carried a little more meaning, because somewhere in the silence, somewhere in the echo of a crowd chanting Hogan, 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 there was still a spark. A reason to keep going. A promise to live loudly, not in defiance of death, but in tribute to a life.